Geneva at RiskMinds 2011, and I'm here with Michael Alix, SVP from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Welcome to Geneva.
Thank you.
You have a unique background, having come from the private sector to the supervisor. Tell me a little bit about what you are doing at the supervisor right now and how you see the impact of the supervisor on the business.
Sure. Well, first of all, I have to say that anything that I say, Erwin, is my own view and not the view of my colleagues at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and the Federal Reserve System. Certainly, regulation and supervision is in the midst of pretty substantial change, in large part in reaction to the lessons of the financial crisis. Supervisors in the U.S. and abroad are looking for better managed institutions, more resilient institutions, and simpler institutions. That is, no more complex than they need to be, in part to ensure that they can, if necessary, recover from financial distress, or at the extreme, be more easily resolved. So the things that I'm working on are all consistent with promoting those principles. Having better managed institutions means having boards of directors who are engaged with the risk infrastructure, who have aligned risk appetite with business strategy, and who are getting information that enables them to ascertain at any point in time whether the institution is operating consistent with what its ex-ante expectations were. Having more resilient institutions means having better capital and liquidity ratios. Certainly the work of the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision on Basel III is promoting higher levels of capital, also challenging firms to hold more levels of capital for activities that were proven to be rather volatile in the crisis. So that's important as well, and we're doing in the midst of doing the third comprehensive stress test of large institutions in the U.S., and that's something that I think is absolutely critical. Liquidity regulation as well. So there's a lot of things going on, and I'm pleased to be in the middle of it. Yes.
As a CRO, you had relationships with the supervisor. Now you are the supervisor, and you will have relationships with the CRO. You see opportunities there, bridge building, improvements, changes?
I said at the conference earlier today to some concerns that were raised about the differences of perspectives of supervisors and risk managers, that supervisors and risk managers' interests ought to be aligned in a variety of areas. And I certainly, when I was a CRO, I certainly understood that the supervisor could be an ally in helping to promote the right investment in infrastructure, the right policy development, and the right actual decisions by providing some air cover for the risk managers. And that's certainly something that I think risk managers look forward to in their engagements with supervisors. I think that risk managers sometimes see the supervisors as imposing unwarranted costs or meddling or interfering in ways that are not constructive. I think that we're sympathetic to concerns that folks have, and we work very hard to make sure that we're having the right conversation at the right level, and that we're focusing on the important issues and not the minutiae.
Right. Now, clearly there's a lot of things going on, as we've seen at the conference. Any particular topics or projects that you're engaged with or involved with that come to mind? Right.
Well, I mentioned stress testing, and being in Europe, clearly there's interest in the path forward for the European Eurozone and institutions in Europe, and part of our stress test is to try to ensure that institutions understand their vulnerability to further distress in Europe. But there's all manner of potential vulnerabilities out there, and it's our job to try to prioritize, assess what those vulnerabilities are, prioritize those, and engage with the firms so that we and they have a good understanding of how things may play out. And also to make sure that we look and understand the effects across the system. It's not just about any individual institutions, it's about how the vulnerabilities can be magnified or amplified as you go across.
We've had a lot of impressive people speak here today. Anybody in particular who is an inspiration to you?
That's an interesting question. I've certainly been influenced and inspired by a lot of people in risk management over the years. Certainly, the work I've done on the counterparty risk management policy group when I was in my private sector days was very interesting, and Jerry Corrigan led that work. But there is certainly a whole. I don't want to single anybody out for fear that I will get myself in trouble. But I do think that the discipline of risk management has made tremendous progress over the last few years. But having said that, we're worrying about a lot of the same things. So it's about not only knowing what needs to be done, but getting it right.
And you think, is there a convergence going on in your mind between the interests and the studies that happening at the supervisory level and the practitioners?
Well, I certainly think
commonality.
Right. I certainly think that some of the best practices in risk management are being embraced by both the better run firms and the supervisory communities around the world. I do worry a little bit about convergence on a set of metrics or a set of measures that causes concentration in risk. If everybody measures it the same way, everybody avoids the same things, everybody takes risk in the areas that are deemed to be safe, that could lead us in places that I think we might regret. But having a diversity of practice is important, but certainly having a good conversation about what best practice is also very valuable.
Do you think there are any pointed similarities or dissimilarities between the U.S. Situation currently versus what similar regulatory bodies might be encountering here in Europe?
Well, I think that there's a lot of work that remains to be done to collaborate globally with supervisors. The Senior Supervisors Group is one example of a group where we're trying to learn from each other's experiences as supervisors and apply best supervisory practice. There are plenty of lessons to be learned on both sides of the Atlantic, and applying those lessons in a constructive way is very important.
Okay, thank you.